Regarding presidential approval ratings, the old days of big swings and sky-high ratings are gone. Former President Donald Trump's approval rating mostly hovered between 40 and 45%, earning him the distinction of having the steadiest approval rating of any president since World War II. It was certainly shocking how little his approval ratings moved in response to the many controversies surrounding his tenure. But former President Barack Obama also had small fluctuations in his approval ratings as well. As for Joe Biden, the new president's initial numbers are not all that impressive either, or at least that is true when compared to past presidents' ratings in the first few months of their presidencies, often referred to as the honeymoon period. According to 538's presidential approval tracker, 53% of Americans approve of Joe Biden's performance, whereas at this point in the presidency, most new presidents' approval ratings have usually been closer to 60%. So if our new normal is presidential approval ratings that don't change all that much, the question becomes, is it time to pay less attention to them when forecasting elections? And my response to that is, not so fast. On the one hand, we do need to re-examine our expectations of presidential approval ratings. It's both obvious and evident that they are just not going to move that much in our hyper-polarized political climate. But that does not mean that approval ratings aren't a useful tool in how the public broadly views a president's performance, or that they can't still signal a change in political trends. And once we move past the presidency, approval ratings for governors, for example, see far wider ranges of support, largely because partisanship is not quite as prevalent at the state level. Overall, and in general, nowadays it's just harder to have a glowing approval rating. And that's in large part thanks to the rise of negative partisanship, which compels most members of the opposing party to disapprove of a new president right from the start. Consider Gallup's presidential approval polling conducted the month after the last 5 inaugurations of new presidents. When Gallup surveyed Americans in February of 1993 after Bill Clinton became president, they found that 74% of Democrats approved of Clinton's job performance, compared to 24% of Republicans. Now, that 50-point partisan gap in Clinton's approval rating was nothing to sneeze at. But as this table shows, it has only grown, with both Trump and Biden facing an 80-plus point gap along party lines in their early approval polls. Essentially, the ceiling of a new president's approval rating is established from the start. That being said, support from a president's own party may be less likely to slip than that of the opposing party or independents, which means that the floor of a president's job approval is also basically established as well. For instance, while few Democrats ever approved of Donald Trump, the reason his approval rating rarely sunk below 40% was because his approval rating among Republicans remained high. In his first year, it rarely dipped below 80%, and from late 2018 to the time that he left office, he averaged nearly 90% approval among Republicans. So, if Trump's support in the GOP is any indication, Biden's strong hold over Democratic voters should last beyond the early days of his presidency too. Already, most recent polls have Biden polling at around 90% among Democrats. But the takeaway here is not that shifts in presidential approval cannot still happen. They can, we just need to adjust our expectations of how big these swings will be. Observers may have once looked for swings of 10 or more percentage points to accurately gauge how the public responded to an especially big event, but that just isn't a useful barometer anymore. Take the largest and quickest slide in Trump's approval, which came after the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, toward the end of his time in office. That incident sparked national outrage, especially given Trump's role in inciting the violence, but even then, his approval rating had only fallen by about 5 points 9 days later, according to 538's presidential approval tracker. There were only 2 other instances where Trump's approval rating fell by even half as much, so 2.5 or more points in a 9-day period. Once in February 2017, after he issued executive orders to begin construction of a wall along the US-Mexico border and the Muslim travel ban, and then again in May 2017 after Trump dismissed James Comey as director of the FBI. Now, having said all of that, small shifts in a president's approval rating can still indicate meaningful changes in opinion that may foreshadow future electoral outcomes. For instance, the fact that Trump's approval rating was stuck in the low 40s for almost his entire presidency suggested real electoral vulnerability, and it was a big reason why Democrats flipped the House in the 2018 midterms and Trump did not win re-election in 2020. Had Trump managed to get his approval rating north of 45% by Election Day in November, he very well may have won, considering the narrow margins in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin, and Republicans' advantage in the Electoral College. However, we should not read too much into Biden's approval rating as an indication of 2022 or 2024 at this point. But the fact that he is starting out in a stronger position than Trump with an approval rating in the low 50s is a very good sign for him. If he can maintain an approval rating in that vicinity or marginally raise it by a couple of points, that could certainly help Democrats limit the typical midterm losses for the president's party in 2022 and help Biden, or whomever the Democratic nominee may be, win the presidential election in 2024. That is all for today's video though. I hope you all enjoyed. Please make sure to follow my personal Instagram and EP Official on all social medias shown on screen and linked in the description down below. Also, make sure to comment your thoughts and opinions in the comment section, and please hit the like button if you liked the video as well. Subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you all so much for watching. Check out more content from my channel here, and as always, tune in next time. EP out.